Welcome and thanks for tuning in. I'm Lynn Berger, host of Lynn Berger Interviews Remarkable People. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Fredricka Maister, essayist and author. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's so great to see you after all these years.
Yes, we had a bit of a reunion.
We certainly did. It's been a while.
So take me back to your earlier years. Did you know what you wanted to do?
Unfortunately, I did not. I was a lost soul even at a very young age. I wish I were one of those people who said, I'm going to be a writer when I grow up. And that idea, that concept, was the farthest thing from my mind growing up. Oh, I wanted to be a model. I was changing what I wanted to be every week. A teacher, a veterinarian, whatever. It changed. But writing was never among my choices, and which is interesting because all these people kept telling me I should write, even at a very young age. My uncle, who was a pediatrician, and he also was a writer, he would say to me, you should write. You should really write. And I didn't listen. I was always a contrarian kind of kid. So whatever they told me, they said white, I said black, whatever. So I didn't pay them much mind. And in junior high school, I was told by a teacher, did you ever think about being a writer? And I just say, what? Me, a writer? And this same teacher I remember also told me, did I want a soapbox? And because I used to talk a lot and, go to Hyde Park in England and, set up a box and speak to the public. And then even in college, I'm just thinking about individuals who actually said you should be a writer. We were having conferences about our articles or our essays. And this, teacher said, you have so much on the ball. And it was like she was yelling at me. And I could not wait to bolt from that interview. So I just didn't listen. And that's one of the regrets I have now, that I did not listen. I didn't go on the path to becoming a writer. I did everything but. And it was really kind of a fluke the way I became a writer. I didn't plan to be, but I have to say I was destined to be a writer. And the universe helped me reach that point. I started, actually the first time I considered being a writer was I was living in Israel. At the time I was in my early 20s. And I don't know if I was homesick or something had happened. I don't remember the details. All I remember is not being able to sleep and sitting in the den of the home where I was staying and feeling really depressed and sad. And I just sat there. I wasn't very hopeful, and I didn't know what my future would be. I was kind of lost. I had no purpose, no goals. And I started writing about it. It just came out of me. And at that moment, I knew I was going to be a writer. And you can call it divine intervention, which is what I call it. And that's what happened. From there, I took it seriously. I am going to be a writer. And I took steps after that. When I came back to the States, I took so many writing courses in nonfiction, in poetry, in screenwriting. I always had a genre I was interested in. But I think what grabbed me the most, what captured my attention, where I felt most comfortable, was being an essayist, a personal essayist. Because I've always had opinions and I've always felt compelled to share them, usually verbally. But this time, I thought I would start sharing them, by writing. And the first time that really happened was with the murder of my boyfriend of 14 years.
Right. Let's go back a little bit.
Okay.
There's
All
a
right.
lot.
I have a lot, yes.
We have a lot to get to
we
today.
do.
But I just want to help our audience get to that point for you of when you really sat down and wrote this book. But before that, what were you doing? What positions and jobs, and while you were taking classes, I assume?
I was working in publishing. That was my first job. Well, I worked in Israel, but it was, usually in retail, whatever jobs were available for someone Hebrew who wasn't, my Hebrew wasn't that great at that point. And that's what I did. I ended up working in publishing because by then I decided maybe I wanted to be a writer. So I might as well work in a publishing firm. But I ended up working in the field of college textbooks, which was not really up my alley. I didn't enjoy it that much. But I did enjoy it at one point where we had a new director, and he wanted people to write up market research reports about the competition and what readers wanted. And I used to write these long reports, and I loved doing it. And then they gave me the assignment of writing a newsletter for the sales force. And I did that for a while. And then I guess I really realized that wasn't where my passion was, staying in publishing. And after that, I worked for Harper and Row. My first job was W.W. Norton, and then Harper and Row, where I also wrote market research reports. But it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be a writer. So at that point, I did what I might have thought unthinkable years before. I figured I went rogue, and I started working part-time. I didn't do the conventional career pathway, you know, and even in college, after I graduated, well, everybody applying for, you know, big jobs at corporations. I said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to travel. I'm going to have adventures. And I did. But I came back, and then I had those jobs. And then I really decided, I don't want to do this. I want to do where my passion is.
Yeah, and you work part-time at that point.
That's when I went rogue and worked part-time. And it worked out well because I had a rent-stabilized apartment in New York. And I lived on the cheap. I mean, I didn't go to the theater or eat out or, you know, but it was fine. I was doing what I wanted to do. And, you know, I was taking writing courses while I was doing this. And little by little, my life was coming together. I was working part-time and writing.
So part-time, what were you doing?
What I was doing was, I had great part-time jobs, I have to say. Well, my first part-time job, which lasted 20 years, was working for the New York Times in advertising sales, classified advertising. And it was a great job on so many levels. First of all, just working at the Times, that was exciting. And I worked with the greatest group of people. We were, I don't want to use the word misfits, but we were all pursuing our creative dreams, the whole department. And, you know, well, there were some other people too, but it was a room of creatives where we could talk about our struggles. And, you know, we learned so much from each other about not giving up, because none of us had so-called made it. You know, we were just sort of, you know, trying to find our way. And it was just great. And I mean, I took so many different ads. I took real estate ads, business opportunity ads, help wanted, and the best was helping people write obituaries for their loved ones. That was really interesting to me. So I mean, I ended up doing a little writing that way, but it was just so fulfilling, helping people in their hour of need. And it was just so interesting. I never knew who would come on the line. Once I spoke to Roy Scheider, once I spoke to Claudette Colbert. And I think she was surprised that I knew who she was. And I said, I know who you were. It happened one night. And she was so nice. She really was very gracious. She was putting in in memoriam for a friend of hers who had died. And she was just lovely. You know, you just never knew who was going to come on the line. And it was hard work. I mean, I can't say it was easy. It was very stressful. But, I mean, the pay was terrific. We had many ways of earning extra money. We could set our own schedules. I mean, it was great. Ideal. And then, you know, on the days I wasn't working, I could devote to writing, and I did.
And what were you writing at that point?
At that point, I think I was writing probably stories and nonfiction. It was really when I came into my own with the essays. And that's where I found my home, where I found my people. My boyfriend of 14 years was murdered. And that was such, I don't want to know if I should use the word unique, but an abnormal experience.
Absolutely.
I mean, I knew nobody who had a loved one, you know, who died because of someone else's actions, homicide. And it was such a learning experience. I mean, all my ideas about homicide were just upended. And it was just hard to know that I was actually going through this. And nobody I know had been through it to guide me. And we were all people, my friends, relatives, we were all navigating in the dark. And at that point, that experience, because I had to interact with the criminal justice system, which was not easy, it was probably the worst experience, one of the worst experiences of my life. And I went to support groups, which helped me a lot. It really did. It made the difference. And also, I was in therapy, and which helped, but you had to talk to people who were going through what you were. They knew what it was like to be in my shoes. And I guess my experience was so horrific, I just said, people have to know this can happen. And I wanted to share my experience. It was so intense. The emotions were unbelievable. It was so over the top. And I never knew what was going to surface. Anger, depression, frustration. It was a very difficult time emotionally. And my writing really helped me to focus on that. And I think it really helped me to heal. And so I started writing essays. And some of the essays took me a few years to publish. But I'm a very persistent person. I do not take no for an answer. I am not a quitter. That was my mantra. I am not a quitter. And I would just keep sending them out. People used to call me a serial submitter. Because that's what I did. I would submit and submit. People I know. And in my writing classes, my teachers would say, go ask Ricki or Fredricka, whichever you prefer. Ask her where to send it. She knows them all. She knows all the outlets. Because as soon as I would get a rejection, I would look for a new place.
Good for you.
And that kept me going. And I really think that contributed to my eventual success as an essayist. And I don't know, one thing led to another. And I didn't always write about my grief experiences. And I had a few. My father died when I was 12 years old, but I never really dealt with that. I had written a few poems which were not really anything. And it was really Richard's murder, his name was Richard, by the way, that propelled me to pursue essays. And also, I forgot to mention that after I had that experience, the divine intervention experience, I met Richard a few months after in Israel. And he was my neighbor. And he would read my stuff. I mean, it really wasn't very good. It was so, I look back on it and I said, oh my God, I wrote that. What was I thinking? And he would say to me, you've got such a gift here. He really pushed me, and I don't think I would have written if he hadn't been there to really, he said, really, I'm serious, you should be writing. And so that's what happened. I ended up writing because of him, I think. And my uncle and the teachers who told me I should be writing. I finally said, maybe these people in my life are right. Maybe I'm disillusioned. I don't know what the story is. So that's what happened, and I just feel that was my path. And I didn't, go to it on my own. I needed people to help me and to push me. And the universe was there, and,
But you listened.
I listened, and then when I had some success, that was it. I knew I had to do it, and that's when I really went part-time and, wrote.
Okay, so you spent a lot of time writing essays, right?
Yes, well, that I was most comfortable. I wrote other works, articles. I mean, I had some articles published in Big Apple Parent, since this is a New York show. Even though I had no children, I was writing about different aspects of parenting, and I loved it. But it was only when I started doing the essays that I felt like a real writer, because I would get so in touch with my emotions, and that I knew I had something to say. And I did not limit it to grief. In fact, I didn't write that many articles about the grief journeys I experienced. I wrote about so many diverse things, like being a flunky at playing bingo, and going to a bingo game, never winning. And about children, I would write about gyms for children, anything that came my way. I would be assigned, or I would pick these different topics.
Good for you.
And some of my topics also concern Judaism, and about having an experience at a service from when I said your site for my father. That's the memorial prayer.
Yes.
I wrote about my experience there. Just whatever was happening in my life, I would write about.
So it really was you speaking.
And I always felt I knew which one was going to be an essay. Even though I would test all these ideas, I knew if it was right or not. I just knew. Instinctively, I knew I should be writing about this. And I knew it would materialize into an essay. And I wrote about, I had breast cancer. I wrote about that. Anything that was happening. And I wrote about my relationship with my mother. But, they weren't all depressing pieces. There was some humor. It was everything.
Well, it was life.
It was my life.
It was all different slices of life.
It was, right.
Okay,
So,
and you just worked on those essays for a while, and then
nothing came easy. It was not an easy road. I mean, I had essays that I started and didn't find homes until years later.
Okay. Well, you kept up with it.
I did. As I said, I am not a quitter.
Well, one thing, persistence does pay off.
That's what I would tell anybody thinking about writing.
Persistence.
Don't be discouraged. You're going to get rejections. I had a teacher who told our class once, what do writers do? They get rejections. Right. And I've always kept that in mind.
Good advice.
And you can't always take it personally. You never know what's happening on the other end, why your piece was rejected.
One person rejects, one person accepts.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's very at that moment. And then you became intrigued to write a book, right?
Oh, yes.
And yes. So,
which is hard to believe.
So what motivated you to become that author? And then we'll talk about the book. Okay.
Well, I was writing all these essays, and all these people saying, you should write a book. I said, but I don't have a theme. And I didn't have an area I specialized in or an expertise. A lot of essays have, areas where they're experts. And I had nothing like that. I was all over the universe. And people, just kept saying, you should write a book. And I always felt like somehow I wasn't reaching the next level. I was getting disappointed and saying, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I should move my writing to the next level, which would be a book. And finally, I was getting all these rejections, and I don't know, something said to me, you should be writing a book. Stop, messing around with your life and writing essays that are getting rejected. You can still do that, but work on a book. And I kept thinking, but I have nothing to write about. I don't have a theme. And I didn't have any ideas for a book, I thought, but I was wrong. So as soon as I realized, well, let me try writing a book about the grief journeys that have, punctuated my life. So.
And here's the book.
And there's the book. I mean, it took years.
3 times.
3 times a Mourner. And I can't believe it's a physical book at this point. It took years and so many ups and downs. But I knew this was what I was supposed to do. It was my passion. I could not deny it. I had to keep working at it. And I wrote more essays. I mean, some of the essays in the book were published, but there was a whole group I wrote specifically for this book. And I didn't realize I had a book until, I started working with a developmental editor, and I saw they were taking it seriously as a book. So I said, maybe I do have a book here. And I proceeded from there. Okay. And it took time.
Was it hard for you to write? Because considering this, besides writing a book, the subject matter.
Well, I never gave up. I knew there would be an answer if I was stuck. There were so many essays I was stuck in. I said, I don't know how this is going to end. But I knew I knew it was a subject worthy of a personal essay, and I had to attempt it.
It's not a how-to guide. It's more of an essay.
Purpose. Yes. On purpose. Yes. It is not a how-to guide. I'm not giving tips to anybody who's been in mourning. This is my own experience, and it's different from anyone else's. If everybody wrote their own book, you'd have so many different books. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a grief expert. I don't think I should be giving advice to people. Take what you want from my experience. I'm offering it to you, and that's fine. If you don't agree with the way I mourned or did not mourn my losses, fine.
Well, all of the situations were very unique.
They
one
sure
was, as a young child. One was murder. As you said, a lot of people do not experience that.
No.
And then old age, right?
Yeah, and the fact that my mother almost died twice. The first time when she had a hemorrhagic stroke.
Yes.
We thought she was going to die.
Yes.
And then while she was in the nursing home, she almost died of an overdose. She became comatose, and it turned out they were over-sedating her. And it was only by a miracle a nurse who had was a temp at her nursing home had seen a patient like my mother who was comatose, sleeping, didn't eat. And she says, I'm going to try something that I tried with this other patient. And she didn't give her dose at night. My sister called me the next morning and said, Ricki, you want to talk to Mom? She's back from the dead. So she puts her on and she goes, hi, Rick. It was unbelievable, and it was just by withdrawing, and it was a matter of luck.
That person happened to have entered the room.
And it almost happened again a few years later, where she was getting listless and almost comatose, and they told us she was on her way out, that her organs were breaking down. And we said to the doctor, could you do us a favor and maybe lighten up on her dose? Let's just see what happens. Sure enough, she came back from the dead again. And people who used to see her in the nursing home said, we didn't know your mother could speak.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, so it wasn't
like
an easy
shared.
death. It was
that needs to be shared.
It was. And it was a very prolonged death. So when she finally did die, it was as if we had pre-grieved her twice. So it wasn't as traumatic and catastrophic. Also, she was 90. But, it was still a shock because we didn't expect her to die. Even the doctor in residence said, I never expected your mother. She was never on my list to die. But she died in her sleep, which she always wanted. She was a nurse and had seen, horrible things as a nurse and how people died. And she said, if I die in my sleep, celebrate, be happy for me. And she did.
Oh, okay. So that's a nice thing.
It was very nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we move on, let's move on. I will say I read the book.
Thank you.
It was very interesting, and you kind of wanted to keep reading. I mean, it was hard. It was not one of those books like, okay, I'll read 20 pages today, 20 pages tomorrow, because I tend to do that to get through books, especially for book clubs. No, I needed to keep reading.
A lot of my life was in that book. Things I didn't even know were inside me came out.
Well, I felt that.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. So let's move on to a fun fact.
Okay.
Okay.
I know what you're going to say. My love of social media.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes, I found.
Because I told you that. Everyone finds it unusual.
No, I found it online.
It was on my website. Yes.
Or somewhere I read this.
It was on my website.
Yes. So tell me.
I mean, I resisted social media for the longest time. In fact, my mentor teacher, who ran the book class, said, Ricki, you've got to go online. This is what people are doing. You have to. I don't want to. I don't want to share my life with people. I don't want to spend all my time. So now I'm at the point where I spend most of my life online. I get these messages. Well, this week you spent 5 hours each day online. But I love it. I have connected with so many people from my past, from all aspects of my life. And I've met new friends and writers, and they've been so encouraging with the book. It's been amazing. And I post as much as I can. I've reached the point where I don't care if people are sick of my emails and my posts.
Yeah.
The nice thing I have to say about getting older is that who cares what other people think? So I just keep posting and sending emails to people. And I know it might get on some people's nerves, but they can delete them. I don't care. I'm not taking personally. I don't know that they're deleting them, but I feel better knowing that I'm sharing. And I know so many readers hate it, but is now in the world of publishing, it's a necessity.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to be online, whether you like it or not.
Right.
So I'm on Instagram, Threads, Facebook.
Well, let's talk for a minute about the advice you might give. One thing that I heard today was that persistence, not giving up, just keep going. What other advice would you give to young writers?
I mean, try not to take rejection personally, because you never know what the rationale is for a rejection. I will tell you one story that I will never forget, and sometimes when I'm getting rejections, this helps me. I submitted an essay to a publication, and it was, rejected outright. And, it was a form letter,
right?
And it was from, I think, an assistant to the editor or something, and it was a form letter. Then, a few months later, I heard from the same publisher, "Oh, we love your essay. It's so wonderful." And I remember talking to the editor, and I said, "But you rejected it a few months ago by so-and-so." She says, "Really?" She says, "She loved your essay."
What happened?
I don't know. Somehow it must have fallen through the cracks. I don't know. I will never have the answer, but it gives me hope.
That's
So-
a great story.
and I
I'm
think-
sorry it was rejected at first and you had to
Yeah,
go through that, but you have enough stuff out there. That's
Yeah. And I really have to keep saying you have to keep trying and not give up. Persistence, I think, is 75% of the battle.
showing up.
Showing up, and, as soon as you get a rejection, make sure you have another place to send it to, that you're taking an action.
Right.
It's like you get
right,
depressed or you
right,
get blocked
right,
when
Right.
you're not proactive. You've got to be proactive.
Yes, instead of taking the sadness or the
Right.
rejection in, your actions are outward.
Exactly.
And you feel in more control of the process.
Exactly. And it makes you feel better.
Oh, absolutely.
It really does. And I keep doing it.
What's next? But
You mean
After-
writing?
after-
Well, I cannot wait to go back to standalone essays because usually they're only like 5 or 6 pages. The end is in sight. The end was not in sight for so long. And I mean, I was working on it on faith that one day it would end, but it took forever, years. But with essays, they're 6 pages, and they're more controllable. And there were so many unknowns and so much uncertainty with writing a book. And a lot of, I had to do a lot of self-talk, telling myself I was on the right track.
Right.
And yes, it was difficult.
Okay, so any topics for the essays? You want to give us a teaser, or you're not there yet?
Oh, I'm not there yet, but I don't know if they'll be about grief. I mean, I'm sure things will happen in my life, and I'm sure they have been happening in my life. Potential essays that would be worthy of a personal essay. I just haven't had the clarity of mind to tune in.
That's okay. Enjoy where you're
I
at.
am, yeah.
Be in the present.
But this is, I feel like a real writer. And I made the distinction between being a writer and being an author. And I never considered that before. Before I was a writer, now I'm an author. I have a physical book that I can hold in my hand.
On that
And
note, I can't say congratulations enough.
Thank you.
It was wonderful speaking with you this afternoon.